Hello, it's Bob Pandolfo on Wednesday, May 14th, 2025. Welcome to Power Pace with Pandy, and I'm going to have my selections for the Preakness, and they'll be up on my website. I'll post a link right under this. Um, let's go right to my selections to start. So here is how I'm going to pick the race 2816. The two horse journalism is going to be a big favorite. I made him even money. Look, he's the fastest colt in the race. He's always fired. He ran another really good race in the Kentucky Derby. He got squeezed at the start. A horse came over and squeezed a whole bunch of horses, and he got kind of sandwiched in between them. And then he made a really strong move, like rapidly passing horses on the final turn while racing wide. Took the lead in the stretch, and he got run down by the horse that I picked, who was Sovereignty. By the way, I had the trifecta colt in the Kentucky Derby, which I gave out on my website and on YouTube. So journalism, he ran his race. I mean, he got beat by a really good horse, who I thought was the best horse in the race, Sovereignty. Journalism may very well be just as good as Sovereignty. I mean, if this was like the old days, and these horses, kept racing and kept racing into their 4-year-old season, which is doubtful nowadays. I would imagine that journalism and Sovereignty could take turns beating each other. I liked Sovereignty better coming into the Derby, and I still think he's probably a little better. But I mean, these are both really nice colts. But I put him on top, even though there's no value, because someone's going to have to step up to beat him here. But I do think that there are some interesting prospects here, and there are horses here that are lightly raced. They could move forward. The horse I put second is Clever Again. So let's take a look at Clever Again's past performances. Oh, I opened up the wrong file there. Okay, here we go. I'm going to go over every horse in the Preakness, but let's just look at my second choice here, Clever Again. So this is a horse that's bred to run all day long. He's by American Pharaoh out of a Galileo mare. Galileo is one of the great sires of all time, and sires horses that can run, for long distances. So this is a horse with a pedigree to get this distance. So you can see he's raced 3 times. It's fun. It's funny because I never would have thought that with this pedigree that this horse would run well 4.5 furlongs. But as a 2-year-old, he brought him out pretty early at Keeneland, and he showed speed, and he finished second in a good solid race. Then he had some minor foot problems, so he didn't race again until February, which is the reason why they couldn't get in the Derby. But he won easily at Oakland. Then he came back and won the Hot Springs. Now he's stepping up quite a bit here into a Grade 1 stakes, but he looked real good in this race, and you can see his figures improved every time. And there's something that's interesting about this too, is that if you look at the buyer figures, let's look at the buyer for the last 3. You can see that in this race, Journalism has a 102, a 102, and 108 for his last 3, so he's clearly the fastest horse. Only one other horse has a buyer figure of 100 or better, and that's Clever Again in his last start, where they gave him a 101. All the other horses are under 100. So, this is a horse that he's only making his 4th lifetime start. They claim he's training well. He's bred to run all day. He's won these races easily. He's going to leave the gate. He has the speed. So either he's going to go right to the lead, or he's probably going to try to stalk the pace. And I think he probably has the best chance to upset. The horse that I put third is Goal Oriented. Now, Goal Oriented is Bob Baffert's horse in this race. Now, Baffert has won the Preakness a record 8 times. So that's something that to keep in mind. This is interesting too, because in his debut he tracked the pace. That alone is a little unusual, because Baffert's horses usually go to the lead. But he was kind of green and climbing early, and then he came on and he won. So that's a good sign that he wasn't really handling the footing, it seemed. It's a little green, but yet he powered off in the stretch. Then they stretched him out at Churchill Downs, and this was on Derby Day, May 3rd. The track was a sloppy track. Now, he did not get a good buyer. I'll show you here. As you can see, Beyer gave him a 91 in both of his starts, but I have a feeling that that's not accurate. I don't. Everybody else gave him a pretty good figure. You can see that the Beyer the speed figure for Brisnet is a 104 and showed that he improved by 6 points. And then I also have the time form speed figures, which I have on the condensed report. Okay, let me see if I can find that down here. I have it right here. You can see on the time form figures, they gave him a 107 winning his sprint debut at at Santa Anita, and then a 112, again improving by 5 points. So Brisnet had him improving by 5 points. Time form had him improving by 5 points. Beyer had him running the same. I don't think he ran the same race. I think he ran a better race. The track, I didn't think the track was that fast on Kentucky Derby Day, that sloppy track. There was one fast race later in the day, so maybe when Beyer was doing the figures, maybe he brought the figure down, thinking that the track was getting faster as the day went on, and maybe that's the case. And it's possible that his figure is more accurate. But I thought the horse looked good and looked like he improved. And with Bob Baffert, and they're going to send him, most likely, and he's probably going to try to get the lead and try to wire the field. He's definitely a well-bred horse. He has a good size to him and a good stride length, and he looked good winning this race. He rushed to the lead right after the start, and he had some pressure in the stretch, and he just dug in gamely. So I put him third. And then the horse I put fourth is River Thames. Now, River Thames is going to be the second choice in this race. And I'll tell you why I'm putting him fourth as opposed to putting him, say, second. Let's see if we can get over here. Here he is. Now, this horse, he's a New York bred horse. He's bred for speed on both sides. He's basically bred to be a sprinter. Most of these horses that are bred for speed, they're bred to be a sprinter miler type horse. And a lot of times they can carry their speed further. And River Thames, you can see he won impressively at 6 furlongs and then won impressively at a mile. Then he went into the Fountain of Youth. Now, I watched both of these races, the Fountain of Youth and Bluegrass, several times. He ran a really game race in both races. I mean, there's no question that this is he's a real game, hard-trying colt. In this race, just like all of his races, he leaves the gate and he gets good position. He stalks, and then he came up in the stretch and he got the lead. And then Sovereignty had that big explosive kick, and Sovereignty nailed him by a neck, and of course went on to win the Kentucky Derby. So I mean, you look at that and you think, wow, River Thames is a heck of a horse, and he is. But I really do wonder about the distance in the Bluegrass. Again, he stalked the pace. He had a good trip. He has that tactical speed to work out a good trip, and he came on the stretch, and he was real game to the finish. He only lost by 3/4 of a lane, but I don't think the extra distance does this horse any favors. Now he has to go a mile and 3/16. Irad Ortiz is probably going to get him in a really good spot again, but to me, this horse looks like potential Grade 1 winning sprinter / miler. If he doesn't run good in this race, I would expect them to look for something like that, like a shorter distance. But something. He's a real hard trying horse. I was watching the Bluegrass, and I mean, you could see he's just digging in real hard. But I just don't think he's meant to go longer distances. But we'll see. I mean, this isn't a great field. He ran good against a couple of good fields, and he's going to run his race. That's he's the type of horse, he runs his race. Whether or not he can get a mile and 3/16, so we'll see. So let's look over each horse. Now, goal oriented, I already talked about. I think he'll be leaving the gate. Journalism is my top choice. American Promise. Now, American Promise, he had this one good figure here in the Virginia Derby, but this, as I mentioned in my analysis for the Kentucky Derby, this was really misleading. The time is very fast and the fractions are fast, but they come out of a chute at Colonial Downs, that track. It's just an unusual, kind of it's just an unusual way that they run these races there, because they're running a long straightaway to start the race. The fractions are very fast. I didn't think this horse had a chance in the Kentucky Derby, and he didn't. He showed some speed and he lost by 38 lengths. He did not run well in the Risen Star. He did not run well in the Southwest. He ran okay in the Southwest, but I mean, he didn't look like a type of horse that would be winning the Kentucky Derby anytime soon. So that's the story with him. He's a well-bred horse, and he has early speed, but I just think his class is a little questionable at this point. Now this horse comes in from he's been racing in the Middle East. He comes in from Great Britain, Heart of Honor. He lost by a nose when he stepped up into this Grade 2 here. The horse that beat him by a nose, Admire Daytona, didn't race that well in the Kentucky Derby. That was one of the Japanese horses, and he was supposed to be the second best of the Japanese horses. In other words, he wasn't as good as the other horse, Luxor Cafe. And so I think this horse has a lot to prove. Pay Billy, is a horse that's been racing in Maryland. He won the Federico Tessio. He looked good, but he seems like his figures are a little light for this. And River Thames we talked about. Sandman, interesting horse. Now this is a horse myself and other professional handicappers, didn't like Sandman in the Derby, and we were surprised that he went off at the second choice at 5.77 to 1. What happened here in this race? He earned a good figure when he won the Arkansas Derby, but the thing is, the figure was aided by the fact that he was sitting far back off of Blazing Pace, and that's the reason why we didn't like him. We knew that he tripped out. I mean, you could see that he had this blistering pace, plus 28 for the first call here. You could see that, which meant that it was way faster than an average first call. And the same thing with the second call. It was plus 20. You could see the pace was ridiculous. I mean, that was a wicked speed duel. So he was far back, and that helped him earn a good final time. Everything just fell into his lap. Everybody stopped up front, and then he got into the Derby, and he just couldn't really do much. I do think he's better than he looked in the Derby. All these races he's run are pretty good, but he was way over bet here, and that really helped my price. On Sovereignty. I got Sovereignty should have been the second choice, but it turned out he paid a really good price, and the Exact and the Trifecta all paid better than they should have because people were betting this horse. Maybe because he was he sold for 1.2 million. He's well bred. I don't know, but he should not have been those odds. So then we come down to Clever Again, who I talked about, and then the last horse is Gosger. Gosger has not done nothing wrong. He's looked good. He's won 2 out of 3. He's well bred. He's bred to run all day. He has a very good trainer. You can see that Ortiz Jr. is getting off from to ride a different horse. But if you look at the buyers on this horse, Buyer has him running an 88 and 87. As you can see, you have a 101 here. Even Sandman has that 99, although again that was aided by the fact that that's it was such a blazing pace. But River Thames 94, 95. So these horses like Pay Billy and Gosger, who have been running below 90, I mean, unless the buyers are really far off, these horses have to improve a lot. Whereas a horse like Clever Again really doesn't have to improve much at all, especially if for some reason journalism doesn't run that well. But Clever Again, I mean, if this race comes back a 102, he only has to improve by 1 point. Goal Oriented, I mentioned I don't think this figure is that accurate, but he's making his third start and already has a couple of 91 buyers, and he's probably going to run a better buyer in his third start. A lot of times the horses, if you look the way they run better as buyers, better speed figures in their third start. In fact, let's look at the time forms. I'll show you what I mean. Here's the time form speed figures for this race. So you can see Gosger improved each start. Clever Again improved each start. Sandman has a lot of races, but River Thames improved. All right, he declined in the second start, but then he improved and improved. Journalism has a lot of races, but Goal Oriented improved in the second start. Normally these young horses are going to improve from first to second start, and a lot of times they'll improve by another 5 or 6 points or more from second start to third start. Again, if you look at the figures though, time form figures, you can see that Journalism and River Thames are clearly have the two best figures. The Sandman 118 again, I thought that was a suspect figure. So those two horses, also this is another suspect figure. The 118 American Promise, because it was at Colonial Downs. So clearly, Journalism and River Thames are the two kind of obvious speed figure horses, but you have horses that could step up. And Goal Oriented with his 112 and Clever Again with his 113 are more likely, to me, the most likely. Now, I will say that Timeform did give Gosger a good figure here. They gave him a 111, which is not far behind Clever Again or Goal Oriented. I'm a little suspect of that. We'll see. Because the buyer is so much lower. Buyer does not make Gosger look that good. The Brisnet figure also has Gosger basically running the same race that he ran, and I didn't think the Lexington. It just didn't look to me like a fast race. Didn't look to me like he was beating really really fast horses. So I'm a little suspect of his ability to step up enough to win this race, and I think he will be a long shot here. But he's a well-bred horse. If he keeps improving, who knows? At this point, when they only have a few starts, they could step up really sharply. I just think, he has a lot more to do here. He has to improve a lot more than the horses that I picked second and third. So again, going back to my picks, I picked the favorite, Journalism, then Clever Again, who I think has the best chance to upset. I think he can make a forward move. Then Baffert's horse, Goal Oriented, who I think will probably be setting the pace, and he has, also room to improve. And then the really game River Thames, who I think is probably going to find a distance not to be in his favor, but he's a game horse, so he's going to put in his top effort. So anyway, thanks for watching. This I think it's going to be an interesting Preakness, even though it's unfortunate that the horse that won the Kentucky Derby is not in, and we'll talk about that some other time. But I'd appreciate if you subscribe to my channel. It's free, and thanks for tuning in. And by the way, if you want to leave a comment, I appreciate the comments. Sometimes I respond to them, and thanks.